Hello, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the Veterans Day holiday. When you are a long-time retiree like me, every day seems like Veterans Day. My name is Melvin Walkie, and I will serve as your guide on our tour to H&R Nurseries in Waimanalo. Before we start, I would like to introduce the principals of H&R Nurseries. The H in H&R is Harry Akagi. Harry was born in Kaneohe and attended Benjamin Parker Elementary School. His family moved to their 9-acre farm in Waimanalo when he was 10 years old. On the farm, Harry and his 3 sisters and 1 brother helped their parents raise poultry and many kinds of fruits and vegetables such as papayas and watermelon. By the way, where Harry lived, I was his neighbor, just right adjacent to him. Harry attended Waimanalo Elementary and Intermediate School and graduated from Kailua High School, where he played varsity baseball. He followed my same footsteps, except I didn't play varsity baseball. He received with honors a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Hawaii. He pursued higher degrees at the university and was a master's degree candidate and graduate teaching assistant in English, something I didn't know. When I gave him a draft of what I was going to say tonight, he marked it up all in red, and it actually looked like it bled in red, like an English teacher. He ultimately received a Master of Urban and Regional Planning degree from the University of Hawaii. He worked for a private planning consultant and then 8 years as an urban planner for the state of Hawaii. His last job before H&R was the acting director of the State Office of Environmental Quality Control, more commonly known as OEQC. While still working there, he started in 1978 a small part-time nursery prior to teaming up with Roy Tokunaga in 1981 to start H&R Nurseries. Harry and his wife Ann have 3 sons. Harry and Ann own and live on the 2.5-acre lot where H&R's main building is. This is a subdivided part of the original Akagi farmland. Now the R in H&R Nurseries is Roy Tokunaga. Roy grew up on Maui, where he graduated from Baldwin High School. He attended the University of Hawaii, where he received a bachelor's degree in education. His goal was to teach biology in high school. Fortunately for us orchid people and those in the orchid world, he never got a chance to teach. He was recruited by Ernest Iwanaga to start an orchid lab. He spent his first 7 years after graduating from the University of Hawaii cloning and germinating orchids. In 1981, he left Ernest Iwanaga to start another orchid lab in Waimanalo with Harry Akagi. Harry and Roy eventually became partners to form H&R Nurseries. Roy is married to wife Nora and have a son and daughter. Roy and Nora live in Kalama Valley in Hawaii Kai, which according to Roy is a bad place to grow orchids. Okay, so without further ado, let's sail on to H&R Nurseries in Waimanalo.
Wanted to tell you a little bit about H&R for those of you who've come here before and those of you who've not. This will be going into our 40th year in business, and this was always going to be a 1-generation business, and we've gotten older. um, much older than some of you, and maybe not as much as some of others, but we have been shrinking down our nursery over the past 8 or 10 years, getting it down to a more manageable size. A lot of you have retired younger than us, and we expect that we'll be retiring sometime, but we'll let you know when that happens. I'd like to thank all of you who have supported us all these years, who've come visit us, purchased plants from us, and just in general supported us. At this time, our nursery is still in operation. Our nursery is mainly an export nursery, so we have been very busy this summer, even up until now. And we have been shipping, exporting to the mainland mainly. At this time, we're not allowing any visitors to our nursery. Uh, it's, I know it's a inconvenience for some of you, but it's something that we felt we needed to do. Our online price list is still in effect. We'll continue that, and we expect that, you know, we've spent 40 years building up a reputation that we have, and we don't intend to let that go down the drain. So as long as we're open, we'll continue to provide plants that we're proud of, that we're not ashamed of, and we want all our customers to be aware of that. We have had some, even though we're closed to visitors, we have even had some local people um, call us or text us online and make orders, and we've been able to accommodate them. But just like you going to a restaurant, it's just for pickup. So that's worked out well. This is one of our community pot areas. We have, since May, we've continued to plant community pots. We have a lot of new things. One thing that people have noticed, our customers have noticed, is that we have been releasing many things that we never released before. Uh, we've gotten to a certain age where we're not afraid of the competition anymore. It'll take them enough time to bloom out these community pots, and if they want to breed on with them, that's okay with us. We're in our upper greenhouse now. This is where we grow a lot of the 2-inch material. In the past, well, we've always offered a lot of plants in 2-inch, and in the past we also offered plants budded material that was in larger sizes. But that was one of the first things we curtailed because it took up a lot of space and a lot of effort. We made some money from it, but it was a lot of work for the amount of effort, for the amount of returns, rather. We, in as we've progressed, we've developed a reputation that now we can sell smaller size material because people know what we produce and they're confident that they're going to get good results. So we have been concentrating a lot on this kind of size, 2-inch. These are just planted, so they're a little small, but we like to get them a good size. And our customers, a lot of them are very surprised that for a 2-inch plant, instead of getting just a little tiny plant, they're getting a full-fledged plant ready to be potted up. So we're proud of that, and our customers are very happy with it too.
Okay, hi everyone. I have Dendrobium dianshimazu, or why not blush actually. Dianshimazu looks like this. And it's getting ready for the HOS show, which unfortunately isn't going to happen. Last year, I had 46 spikes on this plant, and just about in this time frame, the bulbils found the flowers and the spikes and ate 30 of the spikes and knocked off most of the buds. So a plant like this needs to be protected when the spikes come out. I haven't done anything this year because obviously there's no show. So what I would have done is the sun actually is in the south, which is that direction. The plant is facing the wrong way. It needs to be rotated about 45 degrees so that all of the spikes will be angled toward the sun. That's really critical. Right now, the plant is facing in that direction and the sun is in that direction. So a lot of the spikes are tilting toward the sun. So it's critical on a type of plant like this that you first, I would have staked all of the plants using wire to get all of the flowers growths and flower spikes to come out in the correct direction. Rotate the plant to face the sun, and every day I would come out and make adjustments so that all of the spikes would not be interfering with each other. All total, maybe about 4 hours of just grooming and prepping, making sure there's no mites or bugs. If the weather changes and it gets really wet, I have to move this plant into a covered greenhouse because the white flowers are very prone to botrytis, the black spots. Okay, so it takes a lot of effort actually to set up a plant to try for the best in show at HOS. The other problem I have with this plant is that, of course, it's 30 plus years old. Any kind of attempt to move it, the plant literally tries to fall apart. So trying to keep this plant together one more year, then the next year, has been the challenge. But it's still performing well. Unfortunately, there's no show, but at least you get to see it. So what I'm going to do is that we're going to try and harvest off some of the keikis and give it away to some other people who may have a chance to grow it. So from a keiki like this, or a medium-sized plant, it takes only 30 years to get this. So you have to work backwards. So someone who is 60 years old today, by 90, you should be able to do it. So the only person I think has a chance is Adam, Alameda. He might be 60 by the time he actually gets a plant like this. Okay? This is Dendrobium one-eye blush. 2-3 weeks after the first shots, the flowers are opening perfect for the HOS show, which would have been this week. Of course, there's no show, so that's a shame. But what you want is a plant that will bloom, usually about 2 weeks to a month before the HOS show of this type, because you want the flowers fully open. The problem in many of the plants that we try and save for HOS show, they either bloom 1 week after, which is too late, or they bloom far too early, and the flowers are not in good condition. So on white flowers like this, trying to keep the flowers without botrytis is one of the keys. And what is missing is normally I would have been grooming the plant very early and having all of the spikes so that they're not really interfering with each other, taking the plant into a protected greenhouse so the spikes don't break like this. And this particular cane had hit the shade cloth, so bent all of the spikes. So naturally you need a taller greenhouse. There's approximately 50 something spikes, which is more than last year. Last year I had 40 spikes, but it didn't go to the show because the bulbils ate 30 spikes. Also, what Mel's gonna try and show later is there's a frame in here. It was built 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, with Calvin Abe. And what we wanted was to somehow transport this plant into the HOS show. So we had to reinforce the plant, put it on a plyboard with 2x4 braces. We tied the plant to the braces and had to bring the plant into the show in a horizontal position. So when we got it into the van, I had to then brace everything again and carefully go to the show, hopefully there's no accident. Otherwise everything would be broken. The problem is just trying to transport the plant. You're going to lose quite a few of the spikes, a lot of flowers fall off, and it's just very difficult to bring something in like this. It normally takes 2-3 people, put it in a cart, and we transport it in. So it was a major undertaking, but it worthwhile. Just one plant. So every year I look at it, oh, just one plant for the HOS show. So next year, maybe if the show goes on, one plant for the HOS show. One of the things you can see is the brace that Calvin and I have made. There's a plyboard here, 2x4 here, another 2x4, and everything braced. And the plant is actually tied to it. After the first year, I realized I couldn't get the brace off because the plant had then rooted onto the brace. So we left it. So for 5 years now, the brace has held up quite well. This is one of our original greenhouses. Harry put this up in probably 82 or 83. And because of the low ceiling, we normally just used it for odds and ends, seedlings, and plants that we were selling. More recently now, we're transporting plants from the bigger greenhouse here, and this might be one day the last of the main greenhouse that we have on the Akagi property. Number 2 is at the far end, we have what we call our double shaded area, and that's where we grow things that like a lot of shade, like the habanerias and the paphiopedilums. There's only 1 or 2 left, and the Oncidium alliance and the Calanthe, Phaeocalanthe. So this was a multi-purpose greenhouse. Also, this is the only greenhouse that's within range of the reverse osmosis water that I've been practicing with for about 2 years now. Some of the biggest improvements in culture I've come across is using the reverse osmosis water. Thanks to Tanya Lamb's program on how she uses rainwater, I realized that water alone was probably the reason I was having so much trouble with my hanging plants. And just making that adjustment with what little rainwater I could collect and the reverse osmosis water, I was able to turn around many plants and make them from so-so to excellent. So I highly recommend to people that for a modest investment, you can grow some of the most beautiful orchids that you've ever seen in your own backyard without moving. I wish I had done experiments with the RO water, reverse osmosis water, 30 years ago. Over the course of my career, it would have meant over $1 million in extra earnings. It's just amazing, something that I overlooked, and I wish I had done it. But for you and others and the younger people, never too late. Look to the water, how to use it correctly, and if you need to, using reverse osmosis water. And the results can be fantastic. So a hobby that was a problem can become so much more enjoyable that it's worth the $600 or $700 investment. So I highly recommend it. Reverse osmosis water. One of the new things I've been doing, I wish I had done this many years ago, is to use reverse osmosis water. H&R Nurseries in Waimanalo, unfortunately, is very dry in the summer. And with the normal trade winds, it has created a problem where I could never get enough water on the plants. Not only that, every time you wet your plants down, you're adding a little bit of the water salts that are very difficult to remove. The solution would be to use rainwater, but it doesn't rain in the summer. So I've been buying larger and larger oral systems. This latest one I bought is called the Hydrologic. Oops. It's called the Hydrologic 1000 because it can make 1,000 gallons a day. But some of the things you learn about something like this when you buy it is that it wasn't exactly designed to deliver 1,000 gallons a day. You can get 1,000 gallons, but the life of the membranes, the filters that come with it, are all based on using 50 gallons a day for a 1,000 gallon a day unit. What it means is that every 3 months, I have to change all of the filters and membranes. And the cost for the unit itself, when I first got this part, was $650, Amazon Prime, so they paid for the freight. I think it was $300 for the pre-filter, which is an option. It makes the one filter here last a lot longer. So by buying this, I could go 6 to 8 months with just without changing any of the filters here. But I've been changing the oral membrane filters every 4 months, and the cost is approximately $300. Okay, so what do you get for it? Some of the nicest plants I've ever grown. There are species and beautiful plants that we're going to see later, like habanerias, the Arangus luteal alba, and many of my hanging plants that we'll take video and pictures of later, where I literally killed everything that I tried to grow hanging. And the reason is it was hot, dry, and every time I watered them, like I would water 2-3 times a day, thinking it was what the plants wanted. They wanted the water, but they didn't want the salts that came with it. So over time, instead of growing better, the plants grew worse. So on a hunch, thanks to Tanya Lamb, who uses only rainwater, I'm not about to save 10,000 gallons of rainwater to maintain this greenhouse for the summer. So the oral unit is a much simpler, easier, and I think even cheaper, less expensive than trying to collect enough rainwater for this 7,000 square foot greenhouse. Okay, so also for hobbyists, a unit like this is maybe perfect. In other words, $650, and you grow now the most beautiful orchids, and you can match, you can name names of the best growers that you know in any society, and using oral water, basically just the oral water, all of your plants will then start to look like the best you've ever seen, especially if you're in a harsh area. So the harsh areas are Hawaii Kai, Waimanalo at sea level, Kahala, bad place to live, Kaimuki, Salt Lake, Eva, Pearl City, low level. Once you hit 500 feet on the mountainside, you're good. 1,000 feet, even better. Eva Plain, terrible. But if you go to Kapolei, not too bad. As soon as you get to Mililani, and a lot of people in Mililani, and Kunia and Wahiawa, I noticed it becomes so much easier to grow plants. There was a time I almost moved to Maui to get to 1,000 feet in elevation because you could buy land at that elevation, but I didn't want to move to the Big Island, which had the most land. But lots of earthquakes and volcanoes. So I didn't move there. But once my kids started to get used to Oahu, there was no moving. So I had to grow the best plants I could at H&R. So the way I do it with city water is this particular greenhouse that you saw some photos of. We run irrigation at approximately 12 to 15 minutes. In the summertime, about once a week or every other week, I run a double irrigation, so it goes more than 20 minutes. That's a lot of water. I flood the whole place. Okay, so when you calculate how much RO I'm using, I'll save approximately 3/4 of the water. RO does require some wastage water, but the amount you need now is so little that you actually save a tremendous amount of water. One of the biggest changes that occurred over the last few years is we started to use reverse osmosis water. So more and more I've been using reverse osmosis water, and it has taken out most of the spots on the leaves. The best part about the reverse osmosis water is that the plants have been really growing really well and giving me extra bulbs. In the past, I would just get one bulb per plant. So it's hard to improve or increase the number of bulbs and growths in a pot if you're only getting one pot. When I started to use rainwater and RO water, all of a sudden I would get 3 or 4 bulbs extra every year. So the plants are getting bigger. Then the following year it doubles and triples. So from one bulb I had 3, then 6. So this one has about 8. So by next year I'm hoping for 20 or more bulbs. And it always blooms for HOS show. So if you grew a number of these plants, you could have it for the HOS show. And that's one of the things I was trying for on some of these plants where they're specimen plants that are legal. Started off with 1 bulb, 3 bulbs, then finally up to, who knows, 20 to 30 bulbs. And each bulb will give you 1 spike. And I probably could keep it in that 1 6-inch pot. So as the years go on, be on the lookout for, and in front of me also it's Habanera rhodokyla, and another species is the Habanera robilinii. Looks almost like it almost looks like the rhodokyla except bigger flowers. And it's a much more outstanding plant. This is a starting point for all orchid growers. This is one of the first plants I ever owned. Okay, the name is Brownara Nora, and I got it in 1977. Okay, the history goes like this. Alice Iwanaga made a hybrid of, I think it was at that time, Ipecac Charlie Brown crossed to Diachrom biconudum. But anyway, the important thing was that when it first bloomed, Alice said, why don't you name this hybrid after your girlfriend, Nora Higa? So, being that I was hopeful that her name was going to change, we named this Brownara Nora. Fragrant. I've had the plant ever since. This is the last plant that I have, but I'm trying to make sure I don't lose it. It will never be duplicated again, and I haven't seen it anywhere for a long time. But what's important on this particular video as we talk is keep in mind, along with the Dendrobium wieni blush, I've always looked for plants like this Brassavola cordata that always made it for the HOS show. This Brassavola cordata always bloomed in the first week of October, rarely missed. Sometimes 1 week ahead, sometimes 1 week back. It's important it blooms before the HOS show, which is the second week of October. Because if you bring a plant in bud to the HOS show, it doesn't count. So it has to bloom before. So Brassavola cordata and its hybrids like Brassavola Little Stars has always been one of the main plants that I tried to grow into specimen plants. So a hybrid with the Brassavola cordata here, crossed to Brassavola nodosa, makes the Little Stars. So this has been one of my mainstays. It was a hybrid first made by Stewart's, but Stewart's used a different nodosa. In fact, the Little Stars from Stewart Orchids was not the best growing plant, so they never remade it again. So almost all of the Little Stars that you see today comes from H&R Nurseries. And it's made using this particular type of cordata, which always blooms in the first week of October. Okay, got it? The hardest plants to grow well is a leafless orchid. They're nothing but roots. It turns out that the best plants I have are growing on plastic trays. They're very sensitive to poor water quality, so ever since I started using the rainwater RO water, I actually get more regular flowering. This is called salii, and the reason you would know it's salii is the spur comes up very short and it's upswept only about an inch. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's a very short spur. The spur is this back part of the flower. The Lindenii, the famous ghost orchid from the Everglades, looks exactly like this from the front, but when you look at the spur, I've had it go 7 inches. It goes up and it comes back down again, and that's Lindenii. I have 2 plants left. They're very difficult to keep alive. Because of that, I took Lindenii and crossed it to this salii, which comes from probably Dominican Republic, and this is the hybrid. And this is salii by Lindenii. Okay, so in this section, a lot of the plants, I try to get them water twice a day, but it's been so hot and dry that they're really, really suffering. So that's where the pure water comes in really handy. If you live up in the mountains, the humidity would have been supplied just by being up in the mountain, and as clouds come in, condensation in the morning provides the plants with pure water from the morning dew. So many times, even during the dry season, the plants are being hydrated with pure, pure, pure water. So just keep thinking in terms of where the orchids come from. If you can keep the salt levels very, very low, your chance of growing almost any orchid goes really, really high. If you're having trouble, the first thing I troubleshoot is now on how you water. So if you use city water, I have sprinklers here, and we run it approximately, I would recommend 15 minutes during the summer. That's a lot of water. Another way of looking at it is usually when people have lawns and they're growing grass, the recommendation is you run your sprinklers about 15 minutes anyway. And the reason is you want to push the water and salts down below the root zone. If you water lightly, even grass, the salts will accumulate on the upper surface and your grass will eventually die. On the orchids, what happens is what you need is pure water to keep the velamen, the covering on the roots, free of salts as much as possible. It's really hard to do. Every time we fertilize, anytime we use any kind of water, the salts will accumulate. So the question is, how much water you have to apply to rinse it off? So when I hand water in here with city water, I would come down and water. 5-10 minutes later, I would come back water again, and many times I'll come from different directions. And usually 3, sometimes 4 passes in the summertime. So in other words, I'm not watering the plant all the time, just one plant. The idea is to wet it, wet it, wet it. Each time you're rinsing off the salts, and it takes at least 4 passes to keep the salts reasonable. The best places I've seen people grow leaflets orchids like this would be Big Island, 1 or 2,000 feet, and they seem like weeds. I wouldn't be surprised if you're, let's say, Aya Heights or upper part of Mililani, just your higher humidity, and this become like a weed. Okay, so it's just the humidity and the water you use. Okay, so good luck. Try and get some rainwater directed at plants like this. This is really critical. Then all of a sudden you can have much easier growing plants. Okay, that's about all in this section. Dendrobium smiley blooming out of season. Normally I never see flowers except in the spring. Dendrobium smiley is one of the giveaways, or one of the door prizes that Mel's going to give away after the program. Smiley is a bird pollinated flower. It has real nectar. Birds see color, so some of the most beautiful flowers are bird pollinated. The leaves have to fall off the canes. If the cane does not drop its leaves, it never flowers. So sometimes I actually have to help the plant and take off some of the leaves to help the plant flower the next season. Once you have some bare areas like this, the plant may attempt to flower. So if you notice, this cane has no leaves, so it flowered. This cane has no leaves, so it flowered. Okay, and flowers last quite a long time. If you were to eat the flower or taste the base of the flower, there's real nectar in this particular flower. So Dendrobium smiley this one comes from New Guinea, has a bigger flower. The normal form we normally see, it came from Australia.
Yeah, welcome to my, I guess you could call it a personal or hobby house. I'm only growing some select things here. This is a little shade house that I built about little over a year ago, and only occupied it less than a year now. I deliberated what to put on the ground, whether I was going to put gravel or shade ground cover, but I decided since it's so small, I would put concrete, so I did that. The poles are a little short because we recycled some old poles from our old greenhouses on the other side, and that's why it's only 8 feet tall. But I doubled up here with these hanging tents. They're basically the tent fittings you buy from the store, easy corners, except these are not the usual pipes. They're water pipes. Are extremely heavy, but it'll keep it down in the wind. I got everything hanging here. It's kind of nice. I get to keep the floor clean, and everything's clear. It's a little tricky getting the different heights, but I got it all so that I can look at the plants and look at every plant. Everything's spaced, nothing's touching anything else. It's kind of a bucket principle where, you know, you swing a bucket and it stays put. So I'm not too worried about the wind. But when we had the hurricane threat, well, I did take a lot of them and put it into my garage. I got a lot of Walkerianas in here, and Violaceas, and some other Cattleya species that I like, and of course some special dendrobiums that I especially like. I don't know. Right now I'm using just tap water to to water them. I have a sprinkler system here that's set up. It's, if you can see, it's got sprinkler heads, 2 rows running off of one manifold, and it gives a very, very even coverage. It's like a cloud forest in here when I turn it on. But I can also water with water hose. I do intend to put up a RO system. I need to put a little concrete slab up there and make a little structure to cover it up, keep it protected. Right now, I'm fertilizing the old-fashioned way with ozone. I mean, our greenhouses have the state-of-the-art injectors. You know, we can 2-inch lines and we can inject the whole sections at a time. But right now, it's just a ozone, and it suffices. I do it maybe once every 2 weeks. Should be more often, but that's all I have time for right now. There's room for improvement in here. Right now I have pretty much everything planted in the hydrothon and these baskets. I think it's a little too dry. You know, I need to water more often than I like. So I will be changing some of the potting mix to include some the New Zealand orchid bark. The reason I use this hydroton in the first place is because I was taking a lot of plants to Japan, and this enables me to bare root them easily without damage and just repack with sphagnum moss, which is allowable. Bark is not allowable in Japan, so I needed to consider that. The top is 50%. This supplemental shade is 50%. And I'll just leave this on probably another month when it gets a little cooler. People think that things like Walkeriana and some of the Cattleyas really like the strong sunlight in the summertime, but that's not the case. They just kind of sulk if they get too hot. So they appreciate the double shading. And I'm not sure what happens in here, but in our other shade houses, when I first used the double shading, we had 10.5-foot shade on top, and about 2 or 3 feet underneath we had a supplemental shade, certain areas. Middle of the day, middle of the summer, on a sunny day, it cooled it down by 10 degrees. There's a 10 degrees difference between this shade and this shade. I'm sure it's not that much here, but it's quite a bit. So that counts for a lot. A lot of the Walkerianas will be blooming in November or December, January. So I'm looking forward to that. Right now nothing's blooming, but this summer there were a lot of violaceas blooming. They bloom from April, June, and then again on August, 3 times a year. So had quite a few violaceas blooming then, but nothing's blooming right now.
The giveaway for the presentation I'm giving, there's 2. One is Akagi blush. It's a cross of the Waianae blush that takes the best in show with the Diane Shimazu. It looks very familiar. So it comes out with that pink lip and always blooms for the HOS show. The other plant is one of my favorites. For 25 years, I've been line breeding my namesake, the Roy Tokunaga, to be pink. So for those of you who saw it at the HOS meeting where it got the award, one of the parents is this. It's the pink Roy Tokunaga. There's no guarantee, but hopefully someone will bloom another really beautiful pink. So it'll be a pair of giveaways. Okay, so be sure to participate in the lucky number draw. What Adam is pulling is Dendrobium smiley, one of my favorite species. It does get a little big, but it's one of the most fantastic of all the flowers in the dendrobiums. What I'm pulling here is Brassavola nodosa. I spent 30 years improving Brassavola nodosa. So this is the end of 30 years of hybridizing to make it a better nodosa. So whoever gets these, be sure to bring it to the meetings. It always blooms in October, November. Oh, Adam is pulling a larger smiley eye. The other one was the variety Leah, which is the plants are smaller. He's going after the seedlings that are much bigger. Most people should bloom them by next year for the first bloom. The leaves need to fall off the bulb, so what we do is we grow them very fast when they're young, and they get very unwieldy. From a 2-inch plant, we get a plant like this in about a year. These bulbs here have to lose their leaves. So sometimes when they start to turn yellow, we give them an assist. In nature, it gets very dry during the winter months, and the leaves will fall naturally. And this is where the flower spike appears, always on a bulb that has no leaves. So when we go on the other side, I can show you a smiley eye that's in flower.
Good job, Mel. I think everyone's muted.
Takes us a minute to get back into it.
Hi, Hilda.
Wasn't that a great video? That was so awesome.
Sorry, I was on mute. I have a question for Harry. This is someone from the audience. It says, how do I find out what is available for sale at H&R Nurseries? And if I buy, can I pick it up at a nursery? Harry?
Yeah, well, our price list is continuing to be on our website. It's a download on hrnurseries.com. And everything we have for sale is on the website. I asked that, well, people are ordering either by telephone or by email, but I asked that, be patient, and I'm not, we have our gates closed most of the time. So I schedule appointments for people to pick things up. So generally they give me their charge card number. I run the charges and I have the plants ready. They just come and pick up, just like Zippy's or wherever you pick up fast foods.
Harry, what are some of the more popular plants that people are buying currently at the nursery?
Oh, you name it. They're buying all sorts of things.
we had a special on the Laturia dendron. Well, we had plants that we had intended to sell at the a Florida orchid show. So we had made large numbers of them, and that didn't happen. So, so come summer, we had all of these plants in 2 inch, especially, um, and they just kept on growing, and so they were huge. So we had these things that were available. Um, you name it, people have been buying. We've had some special things. For example, we had a small number of Cattleya dowiana, the Rosita type, and the regular yellow with the red lip. Those sold so quickly that I think within a week, and people were calling or emailing to try to get them. And unfortunately, we just had a limited number. So really all kinds of things. Um, Also, like I mentioned in the video, we have been releasing things that, especially in compound, that we never released before. But we're a certain age now, and we don't care about competition anymore. So a lot of things are available that have never been available.
Is there a special that's going on right now?
No, not really. Just day to
Okay.
day, as some things sell out, and sometimes when people call, then I have to suggest a substitute for something. Some things we have too few to list, and I'm taking the calls on my cell phone, so it's a new experience for me in that I've always taken orders before, but in this case, I'm taking most of them, and I have contact with the customers directly. So we talk a little bit and text back and forth.
Do you want to give your telephone number out?
Oh, it's on the website. It's 808 366 3151.
Okay. I have another question. This is probably for Roy, from one of the people in the audience. They want to know how they can get a hold of one of the cuttings from Dendrobium Whyni Blush.
Plant is falling apart.
You
So-
say you're going to cut it up.
So this year, yes, it will go into pieces. So I'll check with Harry and maybe we'll put it on our catalog, depending on the size. So if you're well on in age and you don't have the 30 years, we'll have some big pieces you can buy for a certain price. Then you don't have to wait so long. But
Or
the
you
plant
can-
never misses the HOS show. It's always blooming for the HOS show.
Or you
The,
can take pictures.
yeah, the blooms this year is probably the most ever, huh?
Yes, it's been going up every year. So it's when I first brought it, it was like about 30. Then it went more than 30. Then it was 40.
And the other thing I noticed, it seemed like the flowers were larger. Or
So that's the oral water. So it's not your imagination. I have run experiments with some plants getting RO and others not. And the same plant, almost in the same place. And the plants with RO water are bigger flowers. I have a theory on that too. So I'm passing advice on experts and getting their opinion on it. It has to do with getting more water into the roots at the right time. So when the buds are expanding, if you think about it, the plant is actually blowing the buds up like a balloon. So what's critical would be the root pressure. So the more water you can get into the root, like it includes at night, because that thing is expanding day and night. So the hydration might be the critical element. So making for a bigger flower. Dr. Wang in Orchids wrote about, he had noticed that some plants that were getting oral water by measurements had flowers that were bigger. You just kind of like mentioned it as a matter of fact, no scientific experiment on it. But if you think about how the flower is expanding, anything that can increase the root pressure, which means the water coming up the plant, will increase the size of the flower. And it's a good experiment somebody can run one day.
Mel,
Okay, go ahead.
Mel,
Are they on the,
Mel.
yes.
Yeah. Actually, I counted the number of spikes. There were 67 spikes this year.
Oh, that's amazing.
There were some canes with 6 spikes. Normally you would have 1 spike on a cane or maybe 2, very rarely 3. But there were 2, the top ones that had 6 spikes. So, you know, and for real, the flowers were bigger. I tease Roy about his magic water. Basically, the RO reverse osmosis is, well, the device is a device that removes all of the impurities, gives you everything but the salts and all of that. So basically, you're getting very, very pure water. And with the regular city water, which has been getting more and more salty, um, again, we joke about making tsukemono, pickles, out of the plants. In the summertime, especially, the more water you give, it evaporates, and then you got to give more water, and then the salts accumulate. So the RO water is I call it a magic water, but it's not in itself giving any nutrients. What it's doing is it's preventing you from putting on a lot of salts and you know, pickling your plant. So like Roy was explaining, your plant does pick up more, the roots are able to pick up more water and the plant thrives. You still have to fertilize and all of that, but the water that is applied, the RO water that you apply is very pure, and so the plant can pick it up without pickling itself.
If you reread that little article I wrote for that anniversary magazine that everybody should have had one.
Yeah, last
Um,
year.
yeah, in the first part, one of the critical things that I put a lot of thought into is that the orchids that we love so much come from areas that are really pristine. You know, there's just very little nutrients. They've evolved in an environment like that. You know, so even though our city water, in a sense, is in the okay range, if you're in the wrong place and the evaporation is too high, it's not okay. And very quickly, the orchid goes into a zone where, you know, it's not familiar, where the salt levels in the media is just too high. When I did readings on the media itself, there's, you know, ways you can do it to test the soil. I sent the results to the university once, and they said everything was fine. So I came to the conclusion that the low numbers that are fine for orchids is actually too high. Okay, so it should have been closer to 0. So in a sense, using pure water, like could be rainwater, that's in a sense the simplest concept. They sell reverse osmosis units now on Amazon, so it's so much easier to get one. The oral water use is like I call it like almost like a game changer, which is kind of frustrating to me because I'm using it so late. So for example, I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is the Neophenicia falcata. I used to cut my plants up and mount them on pieces of wood and other things. And half of them would die fairly quickly, and most would be dead in a year. I could never mount them like this. With the rainwater and reverse osmosis, the roots just take off and the plants thrive and they'll bloom really, really tiny. Another plant. I killed so many of these. This is the Dendrobium canaliculatum. Can you see it, Mel?
Yep, can.
Okay. The Dendrobium canaliculatum is one of my favorite orchids, and I killed so many, thousands. You could have easily sold it. People really want this thing. So, and I put it on mounts. I used to do all kinds of things and kill them all. But now I just stick it on a piece of wood, hang it up. I do everything the same fertilizing, same everything, except the water changed. And it became like so easy. So just this plant alone, a lot of money. Just
Hey,
recently,
Roy,
yes,
it's Tanya. I have one of your dendrobium. That one you just showed, it's doing really well. So I should take a photo and send it to you. You'll be so proud of me because
okay, great.
it loves the water, rainwater that I use.
Yes, good, because you use rainwater, so that's the secret. So after going through your place, I said, well, the only thing I could see that you're doing that is different from me was the rainwater. So this is Arangus luteal alba community pot. Actually, if you can, there you go. It's a community pot. And it actually tried to flower out of season, so there's a few flowers. And I'm not sure if you can see it, but it has a orange column and pollen cap. One of my favorite orchids. In 1973, I was working part-time for Richella Orchids, the Mizutas. Do you remember Richard and Stella Mizuta, the old timers? So I worked part-time. I was paid $1.51 an hour. After you take off for taxes, I got $10.80 take-home pay per day. Richella had this in a small plant, about the same size as I have in community pot right now, and I paid $20 for it. And I had to beg to buy one.
Roy, do you have those for sale anymore?
Yes, we still have it for sale. Yeah, the community pots are, I think, $60 a community pot retail.
Okay.
We still have some. But anyway, I've been trying, this is one of my favorite orchids. Oh, by the way, I killed the first plant within 6 months. So I've been always collecting it and trying to grow it. And do you know, for a 10-year period, I couldn't get seed on my plants. The plants were in such poor condition, they couldn't flower, they couldn't set seeds. It took us maybe 5 or more attempts when we did have the seed on how to get everything right. How to not only get the seed, but how to get the media correct, how to do the flasking correct, and it became very easy. But there were 2 tricks to it. There was almost impossible to spot unless you really were trying something different every time you did it. Otherwise, you lose 99% of the plants. The best people I know of who were working on this could only get 10% of the seed to really germinate and get by with it. So the production on this was always very, very low, and you could get a really premium price on this. So I finally got seed, made 250 flasks, and we averaged about $50 a flask in just 1 year period. So just on one plant, something that I covet, and we still have a lot more extra. It's a game changer where just using the RO, all of a sudden I could do things so easily that was just struggling with all these years. Okay, that's the Arangus luteal alba. Everybody who grows orchids for a long time come across it, and really, it's like plants that you kill it, but you buy another one. And then you kill it again and you buy another one. But if you get your water right, like Tanya, rainwater, the plants won't die. In fact, it'll just keep growing and make kikis for you.
I
So
actually
it's not a
killed that
fluke,
one, so I need to replace it.
So I have other plants that I covet. This is Dendron correntum. It's an endangered species. Used to come out of Thailand once in a while, but you know, for the last 20 or more years, I haven't seen it come out of Thailand. So you have to keep your plants alive, otherwise you can't make certain hybrids. But the point is, I could barely keep this plant alive. Every year I would kill about maybe 20%. I had to keep making seeds to grow another batch of 100 or more, and then we kept killing them slowly. But all I needed was the flowers. The last few plants I had, I put on pieces of wood, and they're hanging the area that gets the RO. And that did the trick. So they're all growing really, really well now. Just that's the only thing that changed, the RO. Another game changer was where we did lose a lot of money, I think, is this is Cattleya luteola. Everyone seems to have trouble producing it. So over the years, Harry, how many do you think we killed? 10,000?
We never produced it.
No, we had it in community pot. We started killing them in community pot, and then everything in 2-inch would go down the hill. We rarely could sell it because the plants look so bad. But literally for years in a row, I would try and produce 1,000 at a time and start with 2,000-3,000 in community pot, and it'll be slow kill after that. Both in community pots, 2-inch, and we rarely got it past the 2-inch. And the plants looked so bad, rarely ever sold it. And you're talking about 25 years of just doing the same thing over and over. Thousands, we killed thousands of these, but I was desperate to get it going. The last few plants I had, I put them on pieces of wood. And this is 1 year, or actually 2 years with rainwater, and then now RO. So it's rooting like crazy, and it's so easy now, almost like no effort. So, and I have enough plants like that, that all of a sudden, just in a small area, it becomes so much more enjoyable just to grow the orchids. So what was painful was if I did the Wilburchang watering, it took 7,000 square feet, or the hanging area would take 45 minutes, just watering by hand. And this is in addition to the sprinklers going off, and the plants would still not thrive. So there is still a huge advantage with the reverse osmosis. So I was thinking with $1,000 investment in reverse osmosis, covering about 7,000 square foot of greenhouses, you're talking many tens of thousands of extra income with the same effort. Okay, so the hobbyists, think about all the plants that I remember people telling me they have. They collect all of our tags, and every plant that died, they'll put it in a can or something, or a pot. And they'll have pots of these with hundreds of tags of all the plants they killed from H&R. So when I think about it, maybe it was good I didn't promote this water thing in those days, because if I had solved the water and then I promoted it and everyone didn't kill their orchids, our sales would have gone way down.
Jeez. He's telling trade secrets here.
Say,
So
Tom,
anyway, it's a game changer. So I'm really encouraging everyone to give it a shot. So I started with a very small RO unit, making 100 gallons a day, but it gave me enough information to know that I was on the right track. I was also trying to collect rainwater, but we have so much salt spray in Waimanalo that the TDS, which is, you want it to be under 100. It was running just about 100 with the rainwater. When I run the RO, when it's brand new, it's running about 7 to 10 parts per million, which is very, very low, almost nothing. Our city water used to be 70 in the 1980s. It's been slowly going up, and I wasn't testing it regularly, but right now you can buy a really cheap TDS meter for only about $15. And to give you a rough idea how much dissolved salts are in there. Yesterday it was running about 220 in Waimanalo. During the winter months, it does go a little lower. It was hovering about 180. Once in a while, I get a spike that goes about 250. So it depends how they're activating wells, I think, in the system. Anything below 200 is considered good water. Okay, but it-
So Roy,
yes.
I have a question. Some of the growers on the mainland have said that they add tap water back to their RO water, and I'm wondering why you would do that.
Actually, our water is too pure. But in some areas, if they do a water analysis, there's lots of calcium and magnesium in certain municipal waters. So for example, in California, the water can be quite hard. I'm not sure what the state levels are, where if you go above 400 or 500 parts per million, you're approaching the maximum limit for what's drinkable for humans. But many places are using well water, even for their home use. And there could be ample calcium and magnesium in their water. So all they have to do is keep the salt levels lower, so they'll blend the RO with their well water or city water. And they try and get it below a certain number. And depending on the type of greenhouse they have, they can grow excellent plants. But the thing that I was having the hardest time understanding is that on the mainland, many growers have wet pads. Essentially, a wet pad is like, would be someone way up on a mountain getting this constant 70, 80% humidity. And if that person would water their plants with that kind of humidity, they don't have to water again for 10 days to 14 days. The plants just don't dry out on certain kinds of media. Versus in Waimanalo at sea level, I could never, if I tried that, the plants would literally shrivel. It was just too dry because our humidity would drop about 50% or lower, and also the temperature would be fairly high. So people with wet pads can use water that has more salts in it than other people, but people in very dry environments would have to be very careful on the salt levels. So as I'm tracking the best growers I know, people with wet pads can grow orchids really well if they have 200 parts per million. Versus someone who grows under shade cloth at sea level in Hawaii, Hawaii Kai, Kamiki, all the bad areas I mentioned. The evaporation is so great that the salts just build up in the roots. It's a very subtle thing, hard to measure. You can't really see it. But I've been able to link almost all the best growers with their water use. So Tanya lives in San Jose, so the humidity can be really, really low. So Tanya would need to have water that is very, very pure. Rainwater. So that's why the rainwater is so important.
Hey, Roy, I added calcium, magnesium to the rainwater. Do you do that to your RO water as well?
It comes with my fertilizer. The fertilizers I use have to have the calcium and magnesium because Hawaii water doesn't have enough calcium and no magnesium. So
I
that's
do
why
too. I use the MSU with calcium, but that seems to be not enough. So I added some more liquid calcium, magnesium.
Yeah, it might be possible. So that's why you tinker with it and see if you need it. When I also when the light is good in Waimanalo, in the summertime, I'm using Peter's 2020. That's half of my fertilizer is Peter's 2020. It has no calcium and no magnesium, so that's when I'm supplementing a lot of calcium nitrate and magnesium sulfate to match the what's missing.
So Harry, I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I had a question for Harry. I know you grow a lot of your Walkerianas and maybe your Violaceas too, in those hydroton, I guess you call them, those clay balls. I guess some people call them leca. You know, we've tried that and they seem to grow okay for a while, but then even though it's inorganic, the roots don't seem to like it after a while. Is that salts, or have you ever had that problem?
Yes. I think let me go back to something that Roy was talking about, and this concerns our tap water. We had a greenhouse about 1,000 or 3,000 square feet. And it was a covered greenhouse and we had it for community pots. And it would get very dry. So we put up a mister system in there. We had a fogger system in the greenhouse that Roy showed you, but we had a mister system, which was just a cheap version. You hook up these pre-made hoses that have these tiny emitters. And we had also fans in there. So the combination of the fans, 4 fans in that greenhouse, and the misters, so we were able to. The intent was to create humidity and with the misters, and the fans were to disperse the humidity. What happened, however, was that this did happen, but the community pots that were in there for a while got a crust, a white crust on the leaves. And you know, this was the mineral deposits from the water. The misting also rotted out some of our greenhouse, the cross members, and we had to replace them. They're made out of metal and they actually rotted them out. So we had to replace them. Back to your question about the hydroton. Yes, they're very porous, so they would tend to collect the salts. So what you got to do is you have to really flush, and just believe you have to flush because you know the coarse exterior they are collecting salts. I think that the pure water, reverse osmosis or rainwater, would help a lot. So you know, you just have to flush. Also, they tend to be very dry.
Mhm.
The media tends to be very dry, and you know, there's a lot of surface area, and it dries out very quickly. So the combination of the drying out quickly and collecting the salts, I think that's the reason. Um, Somebody on the mainland told me about this that over time, but I found that by flushing a lot, that even though I'm not using the reverse osmosis water yet, by flushing a lot, you do get rid of a lot of the salts. And I think when I do put in the system, that it would help a lot more. I think you
Kate
can put
Leonard.
some of your fertilizer too.
Yeah.
What's
No,
that?
no, I think
Kate Leonard has a really large oral system. How is it working?
it's fabulous. It's just I just think that comparatively the clay balls, the roots don't seem to like them as much as no media or wooden baskets or even mounting on wood. It just seems after even using the RO water, it's like I don't know if it's, you know, so the RO water, and we don't add city water back. We're just using RO, and a lot of our plants also get rain. They're not all covered. Um, and it's, we're a little over a year into having RO, and it's we really think it's been a huge difference. We have plants. I mean, the growth is better. The blooms are better. I'm not you know, fastidious enough to know whether our flower size has gotten better or not. I mean, we haven't measured it scientifically, but we have a lot less problems. Even like my nodosa's blooming right now. A year ago, when we were only a month into it, you know, I always had spots on my flowers. I don't have spots on my flowers anymore. I don't know if it's the RO or not, but it's the only thing I'm doing different.
Okay, one more thing about the hydroton pellets. Remember that they are, I think they're designed to be used in aquaculture, hydroponics. And I use them for a specific purpose because I needed a potting medium that I could remove easily, which is
Right.
maybe exactly your problem. And I don't consider it a dual medium. It's something that can be removed quickly for me, and I can substitute sphagnum. Remember, I was taking things to Japan.
Right.
I also, it's expensive, so I don't really recommend it to everybody. And if you do use it, mix it with something that, like some kind of bark, because it really doesn't hold water in the summertime.
Right. Thank you.
Any
I
other
have another
questions?
game changer.
Oh.
This is Saffronitis sinua. So Harry may not know it, but I know almost the exact number we killed on this. At least 50,000. I tried this so many times, thousands at a time. And as of just a little while ago, we had almost nothing to sell. It's a very desirable plant that everyone wants. So this plant is growing in an empty basket. So I just top the plant on top of a net pot and with a piece of wire, and it's just hanging there. It became so easy to grow things like that. So just that plant alone was tens of thousands of dollars in lost sales. Such a tiny thing, you know, it's a little plant, it's $10, and as fast as you can produce it, you could probably sell it. Everyone wants it. Just could not figure it out. Turns out it was just the water. Well, actually, the salt buildup. Some plants are very sensitive to that salt buildup, and it's very deceptive, so they just don't thrive. We thought it was altitude. Some of these plants come from higher elevation, so H&R being 21 feet. We thought that may have been the fatal. But it turns out you change the water and plants can be grown. Maybe not as good as where they come from, but close.
What would be the easiest way to deliver catchment rainwater to plants that are hanging high up?
The cheapest would be like a sump pump for about $100. I tried a pond pump, but you don't get much pressure when you go up high. The sump pump was not designed to water plants, but it works. Right now, because I need time is money, and I'm trying to water sometimes 3,000 or 4,000 square feet of orchids quickly. I don't have to drench the plants, but I need to wet everything down. So I'm using a transfer pump that runs about close to 40 pounds of PSI. You know, it's pretty good water pressure. And when I measured it, it's running about 8 to 9 gallons a minute. So if you think about it, you have a 50-gallon bucket, you know, in 10 minutes, it'll drain it. So I'm pulling out of a 250-gallon tank. So because I have a 1,000-gallon per day unit, I can make 50 gallons an hour.
Well, for those of you that want to try it, these RO units come in all kinds of size. I mean, Roy has 1,000 gallons per day unit, but you find if you go look in the on the websites, you can get it down as low as 50 to 100 gallons per day, 200, 300 gallons per day units. So you may not have to spend $600 on a 1,000 gallon per day RO unit, but buy something smaller and try it out.
Yeah, Hydrologic has a 300 gallon a day. I haven't used it, but I did do a lot of studying on reviews. And after putting this Hydrologic together and running it for 1 year and working it really hard, I'm pretty impressed with it. It's okay. It works. A lot of people had good reviews on this. The smaller units are very slow, so you have to be very patient to get that 100 gallon a day. It's 100 gallons when you first get it. After 4 or 5 months, it's down to 40 gallons a day, then 30 gallons a day. So when I looked up all the reviews on it and they answer some of the complaints, they say things like the unit was designed for someone who uses approximately 5 gallons a day. So when they say that everything will need to be replaced yearly, if you use more than 5 gallons a day, well, you cut it down. So if you're using the 100 gallons a day, you're using it 20 times faster than they had expected it. So you would have to change the filters and the membrane every month to keep running your 100 gallons a day. So just keep that in mind. They don't, in all of the paperwork they have, they don't say anything about it. Someone complained about it and they answered it. So those are kind of things that are hard to find out. So eventually I decided that even if I use 100 gallons a day, I really need a 1,000 gallon a day unit. So you don't have to change the membrane and filters all the time. But once you start growing these beautiful plants, you get hooked on it and you start using more and more of the water. Like I'm seeing roots like I've never seen before. Well, I've seen it at Tanya's place, but not in my place. Traveling really helped. I went to a lot of different places and many fantastic growers. So I can almost just, someone can give me their water analysis and I can even guess how they're watering if they're growing beautiful orchids. You know, like for example, the best cattleyas I've ever seen grown was grown in New Jersey at a nursery called Brighton Farms. It was 2 acres of the most perfectly grown cattleyas I ever saw. I have pictures to prove it. I've never been able to grow a single cattleya as well as all of the 2 acres at that nursery. It turns out I only got their water analysis of that property about a year and a half ago from David Off. He said they never tested their water. It's 50 parts per million, which is almost as good as rainwater. Another area that has a cluster of fantastic orchids growers, and I couldn't get too much information from them, is in Apopka, Florida. Okay, that's where Frank Smith is located, and he's very tight-lipped about how he grows his orchids. So I've been sneaking around and getting information from his volunteers. Okay, so finally, someone in the Apopka area sent me their water analysis, and it's actually 46 parts per million. They grow beautiful ferns in the area. That's another good indicator that the water has very low salts in it. Ferns are very intolerant of the salts. Frank Smith will use his almost like rainwater, and once a week run it 1 hour, 1 hour irrigation. Okay, this is secondhand, of course. Frank Smith would not tell me anything. but he did say it is the water. Once a month, his volunteer said he will tell them not to come because he's running the irrigation all day. So he turns on his irrigation and goes to work. And that sprinkler will run 8 to 10, 12 hours, depending when he comes back, and then he turns it off once a month. And this is using like rainwater. So for those of you who haven't seen Frank Smith, it's maybe probably some of the best overall orchids I've ever seen. So he was able to show off at the World Orchid Conference in 2008. So everywhere I go, I try to get at least the water analysis, how they water, how they use that water, whether they have wet pads or not makes a big difference, and so forth. And you can see exactly how they're growing their fantastic orchids. And it's all based on the water. So, any other questions? Well, the fertilizer, you have to match the fertilizer to the water you're using. So if it's pure water, we're still recommending you use a CalMag Special, Peters CalMag, or the Technigro 13213. Island Supreme sells it. That's why I've always recommended the Island Supreme, the Orchid Special. It's their CalMag Special, which is 13-2-13. It's a complete fertilizer. It has just about everything that someone would need.
Bro, where are you getting your Peters 2020 from? They don't carry it over here.
I've been buying it either from Simplot, Brewer. Yeah, Simplot or Brewer.
No,
They
Brewer
carry the 2020. It's a standard fertilizer.
from Peters?
Yes, or Scott's.
Okay.
The problem with 2020 is that it's a super strength fertilizer. Orchids really love it. You can easily over fertilize your plants for nitrogen. Just a little too much, and you over fertilize your plants. So I try to be careful with it. It can also cancel the flowering on the Laturia dendrobiums. So for those who have been to Richard Takafuji's place, he used to grow tens of thousands of Laturia dendrobiums. I would go and visit, and he would say, "Why are you selling me all these Opala orchids?" So Opala in Hawaiian is junk, rubbish. I said, "What's wrong with them?" He said, "They don't flower. These big, humongous plants." I would look at the numbers, and he grows them twice as big and fast as H&R. I have 10 spikes on my plants, and he has 1. So I used to bring plants with me, and would put it next to his plant, and his plant would be physically bigger, many more canes, but so lush that the plant cannot stop to flower. There are a number of plants like that. So honohonos also, if you over fertilize, there is that risk. The plant is too soft and didn't get enough calcium in the tissue. So I'm thinking on the problem they're talking about on the black rot on the honohonos. It could have easily be a calcium problem caused by too much nitrogen. An easy way to get into trouble is put NutriCoat or the Apex, and the ammonia in it keeps releasing. It's a wonderful fertilizer, but you can over fertilize. So a lot of times, if you look at the label on Apex and the NutriCoat, there's no calcium and not enough magnesium. So if you were to supplement at the same time, I'm sure no problems would occur. Also, I'm finding that when you use a lot of nitrogen in the fertilizer and the plants are loading up on it, I have to increase my micronutrients a certain amount to compensate also along with the calcium. So Tanya, have you ever tried the Microplex?
Yes, I'm still on the first bag. I have good and bad results. So certain plants don't like it. So
Yeah, you have
I'm
to use small
using,
amount. Yeah, you have to use
very,
small amount.
very little.
Okay.
But yeah, some of my dendrobium speciosum this year, since I repotted late, the growth got stunned after I use it. So I don't know why. So I'm gonna stop that, and maybe I should use it more only in the summer and not when it start getting cooler.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I usually link it to the use of uh, the amount of fertilizer I'm applying. So if I'm not shooting too much fertilizer, I don't put too much of the micronutrients also. I'm just trying to keep in balance, balancing out the fertilizer that we're applying. I notice also that if you're under very high salt, like H&R is, on certain areas I noticed I had to give more, which was the perimeter, which was saltier than the interior. So it's some of the problems I have is unique to my nursery. So that's why I don't recommend it to everyone, just give large amounts. So usually you give a certain amount of time and then you stop and watch. The microbes are needed in very tiny amounts actually, unless something is interfering their uptake. The most interesting thing that I've seen in the last couple of years is my daughter, who decided that she wasn't going to, she would water the plants indoors in San Jose, but never fertilize. So she had the plants in solid containers. Anything I gave her in flower, all she did was add just a little bit of oral water. Nothing else. No fertilizer, no pesticides, nothing. Just a little oral water. And she would bloom the plant, reliably for 3 or 4 years. The plant would look starved, but it would still flower without any additional fertilizer. I was amazed. It gave me the idea that it was just the water that was causing most of the problems for people growing indoors. If they would keep the salt levels down, their success rate would go sky high. If you go online, there's actually a lot of people who grow with oral water, and some of them call it like water culture, semi-hydro, and but it's all based on pure water. So here, those are your choices. But the question was asked, I was asked once, is can you grow beautiful orchids with Hawaii city water? And the answer is yes. But you have to always keep in mind Wilbur Chang's style of watering. So when he watered very thoroughly, tried to get it flushed out, and then he would try and skip as many days as he could, which meant sometimes I visited Wilbur and his weeds would be shriveled because he was skipping so many days. It didn't concern him. He said, no problem. The weeds die first, the orchids will survive. I tried a couple of times and it doesn't work in my nursery. So I concluded that Wilbur didn't have any salts. When I dried up my plants, it concentrated the salts and killed the orchids. So now I ran some experiments on some oral flush plants, dried them up severely, and they performed really well. So it is the salts.
Okay, any other questions? Roy and Harry will probably stick around after the drawing, and if you got some last minute questions, we can go ahead and ask them later.